A millionaire in a wedding tuxedo sits on a worn apartment floor, playing trucks with toddlers he just met. His ex-wife watches from the doorway, arms crossed. 2 hours ago, he was supposed to marry someone else. Now he's staring into eyes that mirror his own, realizing everything he sacrificed was a lie. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, sending crystal shards skittering across Julian Archer's penthouse, like tiny diamonds fleeing a crime scene. He stared at the pregnancy test in his fiancée's hands, the two pink lines mocking him with their simple, devastating clarity. "Congratulations," Vivian said, her smile bright enough to power the entire Seattle skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. "We're going to be parents." Julian's throat closed. The room tilted. 3 years of carefully constructed lies, of buried guilt, of pretending the past had never happened. All of it came crashing down in the space between her words and his silence. "I thought you said," he started, then stopped. His brain couldn't form the sentence, couldn't reconcile what she was telling him with what he knew, what he'd been told, what had destroyed his first marriage. "I thought you'd be happy," Vivian said, her smile faltering. "Julian, say something." He forced his face into something resembling joy, pulled her into his arms, felt her relax against him. "This is incredible," he managed. "I'm just shocked, overwhelmed." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes, delicate and expensive. "I know. I couldn't believe it either. The doctor said it's rare, but not impossible. Sometimes these things just happen. Sometimes these things just happen." The words echoed in his skull as Vivian chattered about nursery colors and baby names. Sometimes these things just happen. Except they didn't. Not for him. Not 3 years ago when his entire world had collapsed because they couldn't happen. Not when Sloane had sat across from him in the fertility specialist's office, tears streaming down her face, as the doctor explained in clinical terms that Julian's condition made natural conception virtually impossible. Not when she'd looked at him with those devastating brown eyes and asked what they were supposed to do now. Not when he'd failed her in every way that mattered. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Sloane Bennett Archer, back when she still carried his name, sitting in their tiny apartment in Portland, the one they'd scraped together money to afford while he built his business from nothing. She'd been working double shifts at the hospital, coming home exhausted, still finding energy to quiz him on his presentations, to believe in him when no one else did. And he'd been so focused on success, on proving himself, on building an empire that he'd missed every sign that she was drowning. The day she'd brought up starting a family, he'd been distracted, running numbers for a pitch meeting. "Sure," he'd said, barely looking up from his laptop. "Whenever you're ready." So she'd stopped her birth control, started tracking her cycle. Months passed. 6, then 8, then 12. Her hope had slowly curdled into anxiety, then fear, then the desperate kind of silence that settles over a marriage when the thing you want most becomes the thing you can't talk about. Finally, she'd insisted they get tested. And that's when their world ended. The specialist had been kind but direct. Julian's sperm count was exceptionally low, motility poor, morphology abnormal. Natural conception wasn't impossible, the doctor said, but the odds were worse than winning the lottery. They could try IVF, hormone treatments, surrogacy. But Julian had seen the numbers, seen the costs, and he'd been drowning in business debt, leveraged to his eyeballs, betting everything on a startup that could either make him millions or destroy him completely. "I can't afford any of that right now," he'd said in the parking lot afterward, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. Sloane's face had gone very still. "What do you mean you can't afford it?" "We'll figure it out." "There's nothing to figure out," he'd snapped. "Months of pressure and failure and fear all erupting at once. The business is hemorrhaging money. We're barely keeping our heads above water. And you want me to throw tens of thousands of dollars at something that probably won't even work? So that's it?" Her voice had been quiet, deadly. "You're just giving up?" "I'm being realistic," he'd said, "which you'd understand if you weren't so obsessed with this fantasy of playing house." The words had hung between them like poison gas. He'd wanted to take them back immediately, but pride and panic had sealed his throat shut. Sloane had turned to look out the window, her profile carved from stone. "If you'd wanted a business partner instead of a wife," she'd said, "you should have married your laptop." They'd driven home in silence. That night, she'd slept on the couch. 3 days later, she'd moved out. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks after that. Julian had signed them in a daze, telling himself it was for the best, that they wanted different things, that some marriages just weren't meant to survive. His business had closed its first major deal exactly 1 week after the divorce was finalized. 6 months later, he'd sold the company for $42 million. He'd tried to find Sloane, to explain, to apologize, to offer her anything she needed. But she'd disappeared, changed her number, moved without leaving a forwarding address. Her friends wouldn't talk to him. Her family had made it clear he wasn't welcome. So he'd done what he did best. He'd thrown himself into building the next thing, and the next, until Julian Archer became a name that mattered, a face on magazine covers, a fortune that could buy anything except the ability to go back in time and be the man he should have been. "Julian," Vivian was saying, her hand on his arm. "Did you hear me?" "I asked what you thought about the name Sebastian if it's a boy." He blinked, forcing himself back into his body, into this moment, into this gleaming prison of wealth and success that felt more suffocating by the second. "Sebastian is perfect," he said. She beamed. "I knew you'd love it. We should call your mother. Tell her the news." "Let me clean this up first," he said, gesturing at the broken glass. "You go ahead." As soon as she disappeared into the bedroom, phone already at her ear, Julian sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. This should be the happiest moment of his life. He was engaged to a beautiful woman from the right family with the right connections. They were having a baby. His third startup was about to go public, which would multiply his fortune by 10. Everything he'd ever worked for was finally, perfectly aligned. So why did he feel like he was suffocating? Why did every cell in his body scream that this was wrong, that he was making the same mistakes all over again? Just with better furniture and a bigger bank account? The intercom buzzed. "Julian," the doorman's voice crackled through. "You have a delivery, documents from your attorney." "Just leave them at the desk," Julian said. "Actually, sir, they require your signature. Shall I send the courier up?" Julian closed his eyes. "Fine." 2 minutes later, he was signing for a thick envelope of contracts, prenuptial agreements that his lawyer had been pushing him to have Vivian sign before the wedding. The wedding. Right. That was happening in 3 days. 72 hours until he stood in front of 200 people and promised forever to a woman he'd known for 11 months, liked considerably, loved in the comfortable way you love a well-made suit, but didn't need the way he'd needed oxygen when Sloane had smiled at him. "Stop," he told himself firmly. "That was years ago. You're different now. She's gone. Move on." He was reading through the prenup when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost declined. Then something made him answer. "Hello?" The silence on the other end stretched so long he thought it was a spam call. Then a voice he hadn't heard in 3 years. A voice that still sounded like coming home. Julian. His entire body went rigid. Sloane. More silence. He could hear her breathing. Could picture her the way she used to stand when she was nervous. Weight shifting foot to foot. Left hand playing with whatever earring she was wearing. "I know I shouldn't be calling," she said finally. Her voice was different. Harder. Like she'd swallowed rocks. "I know you're getting married. I saw the announcement in Seattle Business Journal. Congratulations." He couldn't speak. His lungs had forgotten how to process air. "Sloane," he finally managed. Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Better than fine. I needed to." There was a pause. "I needed to tell you something before your wedding. I didn't want you to find out later and think I'd been hiding it." "Hiding what?" Another long silence. Then, "Julian, I'm a mother." The words didn't make sense. He heard them, processed the individual syllables, but couldn't arrange them into meaning. "What?" "I have children. Twins. A boy and a girl. They're 2.5 years old. The room spun. Math happened automatically in his brain. 2.5 years, which meant they were conceived. That's impossible, he said. We were told, the doctor said. I know what the doctor said. Her voice cracked. Believe me, Julian, I remember every word. But apparently lightning does strike. Apparently miracles happen. Apparently the universe has a sick sense of humor. You're saying... He couldn't finish the sentence. His hands were shaking so badly the phone nearly slipped from his grip. I'm saying they're yours, she said. Our children, the ones we were told we'd never have. They exist. And I raised them alone because you made it very clear that family was an inconvenience you couldn't afford. The accusation hit like a knife between his ribs. Sloan, I didn't know. If I had known, I tried to find you. I know, she said quietly. Your private investigator called my mother 6 times. I told her not to tell you where I was. Why? The word came out broken. Because I was so angry, Julian. So hurt. And I was terrified. She took a shaky breath. I found out I was pregnant 2 months after our divorce was final. Right around the time I saw you on the news closing that big deal, smiling like you'd won the lottery. And I realized that you'd gotten everything you wanted. The success, the money, the freedom from the burden of family. And I decided you didn't deserve to know about them. Until now. Why now? Because they're starting to ask questions about their father, she said. Because I look at them every day and see your eyes staring back at me. Because you're about to marry someone else and start a new family. And I couldn't let you do that without knowing that you already have children. That somewhere in Portland, there's a little boy who's brilliant with numbers just like you. And a little girl who negotiates bedtime like she's closing a business deal. And they're half of you. Her voice broke completely. And I hate that they are. I hate that I can't look at them without seeing you. But they deserve to know their father exists, even if he didn't want them. I wanted them, Julian said, his vision blurring. God, Sloan, I wanted them so much. You wanted success more. That's not, he started, but she cut him off. I have to go, she said. I just needed you to know. Before you make promises to someone else, before you have more children. They exist, Julian. Declan and Iris, your son and daughter. And someday, when I'm ready, when they're ready, maybe we'll figure out what happens next. But not today. Sloan, wait, please, he said desperately. We need to talk about this. I can't just... The line went dead. He tried calling back immediately. The number was blocked. He stood in the center of his penthouse, surrounded by evidence of everything he'd built, everything he'd achieved, and felt like the floor had opened beneath him. Somewhere in Portland, children who were half him existed. Walked around, said words, laughed, cried, needed things. And he'd missed 2.5 years of their lives because he'd been too proud and too focused and too damaged to fight for what mattered. Vivian emerged from the bedroom, glowing with excitement. I just talked to the wedding planner, she said. She can get us an appointment tomorrow to finalize the floral arrangements. What do you think about orchids? Julian looked at her. Really looked at her. Vivian Hartwell, daughter of a real estate dynasty, educated at Yale, connected to everyone who mattered in Seattle society. She was perfect on paper. Exactly the kind of woman a man like him was supposed to marry. And she was pregnant with his child, which according to every doctor he'd consulted, should have been impossible, unless it wasn't his child. The thought arrived like a lightning strike. Vivian had pushed for them to move in together quickly, had been eager to blend their finances, had suggested they skip the prenup because it felt unromantic. She'd claimed to be on birth control, said the pregnancy was a surprise, called it a miracle. But miracles didn't happen, not in Julian's experience. In his experience, the universe took what you loved and crushed it, then made you watch, while everyone else got the happy ending you'd been promised. He was being paranoid. Unfair. Vivian wasn't like that. Except he didn't really know what Vivian was like. 11 months wasn't long enough to know someone's truth. He'd thought he knew Sloan after 3 years, and he'd been wrong about what she needed, wrong about what mattered, wrong about everything that counted. "I need to make a phone call," he said abruptly. "Business thing. It can't wait." Vivian's smile dimmed. "Now? It's almost midnight." "It's international," he lied. "Time zones." She studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "Don't be too long. We need to be up early for the venue walkthrough." He waited until she went back to the bedroom, then grabbed his keys and walked out of the penthouse. He drove with no destination, just movement, just the need to be anywhere but trapped in that perfect apartment with its perfect view and its perfect lie. He ended up at Gasworks Park, staring across Lake Union at the Seattle skyline. This was where he'd come to think when he first moved to the city, when he was building his second company, when everything was possible and nothing was decided yet. He'd sat here and thought about Sloane, wondered where she was, if she was happy, if she ever thought about him. And the whole time she'd been in Portland, raising his children, alone. His phone rang. For one desperate second he thought it might be her again. But it was just Marcus, his business partner. "We need to talk about the IPO," Marcus said. "The underwriters are getting nervous." "Not now," Julian said. "It has to be now. We're 2 weeks out. If you're having cold feet, I can't just..." "Julian, what the hell is wrong with you? You've been off all week." "Nothing," Julian said. "Everything. I can't do this right now." He hung up, stared at the water, tried to imagine what his children looked like. Declan, Iris. Names he would have chosen if he'd been given the chance. Strong names. Names with history. He wondered if Declan had his dark hair or Sloane's, if Iris had her mother's smile or his serious eyes. He wondered what they sounded like when they laughed, what they were afraid of in the dark, what books they liked, what made them feel safe. He wondered how Sloane had managed. Single mother in one of the most expensive cities in the country. She'd been a surgical nurse before, but you couldn't work night shifts with infant twins. Had she had help? Support? Or had she done it all alone, too proud to ask for anything from anyone? Knowing Sloane, she'd done it alone. She'd always been too strong for her own good, too determined to prove she didn't need anyone. It was one of the things he'd loved about her and one of the things that had made their marriage impossible. He'd needed her to need him. She'd needed him to be present. They'd both failed each other in the exact ways that hurt most. His phone buzzed, a text from Vivian. "Where are you?" "I'm worried." He looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "Be home soon. Sorry." But he didn't move. Couldn't move. Because going back meant pretending. Meant smiling through wedding preparations while his real children existed in another city. Meant marrying a woman he liked, but didn't love while the woman he'd destroyed was raising his family without him. Meant choosing the easy path again. The comfortable path. The path that led to success and respectability, and a life that looked perfect in photographs. He'd made that choice once before. Look where it had gotten him. Julian sat in his car until dawn broke over the water, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded him of the morning he'd married Sloane in a courthouse in Portland, both of them in jeans, her in a white t-shirt she'd bought the day before because they couldn't afford anything else. She'd been so happy, so certain. She'd looked at him like he was everything. When had he stopped being everything? When had the business become more important than her smile? When had he decided that success was worth more than her hand in his? He drove home as the city woke up around him. Vivian was in the kitchen already dressed for the day, looking flawless despite the early hour in her first trimester. She handed him a coffee without comment. "You look awful," she said. "Didn't sleep." I could tell. She leaned against the counter, studying him with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Julian, if you're having doubts about the wedding, now would be the time to say something." "I'm not," he said automatically. "Then what is it?" He wanted to tell her. Wanted to lay it all out. The ex-wife. The children. The phone call that had detonated his careful reality. But what would he say? How would he explain that he'd been living in a fantasy for 3 years, pretending the past was dead when it had just been waiting? "Nothing," he said. "Just pre-wedding nerves. That's normal." She set down her coffee. You know what's not normal? Disappearing for 6 hours without explanation. Coming home looking like you've seen a ghost. Barely speaking to me for days. So I'll ask you one more time. What the hell is going on? He met her eyes. And for just a second, he considered being honest. Considered telling her everything. Considered the possibility that she'd understand. Then he thought about the wedding in 3 days. The guests already traveling. The deposits non-refundable. The business partnerships intertwined with personal ones. The baby she claimed was his. And he did what he always did. He lied. I'm fine, he said. Just stressed about the IPO. You're sure? Positive. She searched his face for another moment, then nodded. Okay. But Julian? Next time you need to disappear, at least text me. I thought something had happened to you. He pulled her into a hug, felt her relax against him, hated himself with an intensity that made his chest ache. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. I'll do better. That afternoon, he met with his lawyer. I need you to do something, Julian said. And I need you to not ask why. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia who'd been handling his contracts for 5 years, raised an eyebrow. That's never a good sign. But go ahead. I need you to find someone, Julian said. Sloan Bennett. Used to be Sloan Archer. She's in Portland. I need an address, phone number, everything. Patricia's expression didn't change. Is this about the prenup? Because having Vivian followed before the wedding sends a very specific message. It's not about Vivian, Julian said. Just find her. Please. Patricia made a note. It'll take a few days. I don't have a few days. Then it'll be expensive and possibly incomplete. Do it anyway. He left the office feeling like he was moving through water. Everything seemed heavy, distant, wrong. That night he lay in bed next to Vivian, listening to her breathe, and thought about another bed in another life. The futon in their first apartment that was too small for 2 people. Sloan curled against him, her hand over his heart, whispering plans for a future they'd never have. We'll get a real house someday, she'd said. With a yard, space for kids to run around, maybe a dog. He'd kissed her forehead. Whatever you want. I just want you, she'd said. That's all I need. Everything else is extra. But it hadn't been extra. It had been essential, and he'd failed to understand that until it was too late. The next 2 days passed in a blur of wedding preparations. Final suit fitting, rehearsal dinner. Toasts from people who thought they knew him. Vivian glowing beside him, playing the perfect bride, saying all the right things. And Julian going through the motions, smiling at the right moments, feeling like an actor in someone else's life. The morning of the wedding, Patricia called. I found her, she said. Sloan Bennett. She's a nurse at Emmanuel Medical Center in Portland. Lives in a duplex in the Hawthorne district. 2 children registered at a nearby daycare. Declan and Iris Bennett. His heart stopped. You're sure? I'm sure. I'm sending you the full report now. Julian, whatever this is, I hope you know what you're doing. I don't, he said honestly, but I have to do it anyway. He hung up, stared at the address on his phone. 2847 Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, Apartment B. His children lived there. His children. Grew up there. Slept there. Existed there. And in 4 hours, he was supposed to stand in front of everyone he knew and promise forever to someone else. His phone rang again. Marcus. Dude, where are you? You're supposed to be at the venue already. Vivian's freaking out. Tell her, Julian started, then stopped. Tell her what? That he couldn't do this? That he needed to go to Portland right now, immediately. Needed to see his children with his own eyes before he made any more mistakes. That he was sorry, but he'd been living a lie, and he couldn't spend 1 more second pretending. Yeah, he said. Tell her I'm on my way. He looked at himself in the mirror. Tom Ford tuxedo, hair perfect, face that looked like it belonged to someone who had their life together. But inside, he was the same terrified kid who'd driven away from the fertility clinic 3 years ago, too afraid to fight for what mattered. Except now he had a choice. He could get dressed. Go to the wedding. Marry Vivian. Pretend everything was fine. Build a life on top of the ruins of the one he'd destroyed. Or he could burn it all down. Admit the truth. Face the consequences. And maybe, possibly if he was very lucky and Sloane didn't hate him too much, get a chance to meet his children. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A photo. 2 toddlers on a porch, both with dark curls, both smiling at whoever was taking the picture. The boy held a toy truck. The girl had a stuffed elephant. And they both had his eyes. Beneath the photo, a message. In case you were wondering if I was lying. These are your children, Julian. Declan and Iris. They're real. They're here. And you're choosing to miss their entire lives. I hope your wedding is everything you deserve. Julian stared at the photo until his vision blurred. Then he made a decision. He called Marcus. Tell everyone I'm sorry, Julian said. What? Tell Vivian I'm sorry. Tell my mother I'm sorry. Tell everyone I can't do this. I have to go. Julian, what the hell? Where are you going? To fix the biggest mistake I ever made. He hung up, turned off his phone, grabbed his keys, and drove to Portland as fast as his car would go. The photo of his children burning in his mind like a lighthouse, showing him the way home. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, Julian pulled up in front of a modest duplex in Portland's Hawthorne district. The building needed paint. The yard needed weeding. It was about as far from his penthouse as possible, and somewhere inside, his children were real. He sat in the car for 10 minutes, trying to find courage. Then the front door opened, and Sloane walked out. She stopped dead when she saw his car. Then she saw him, and her face went through a series of expressions so fast Julian could barely track them. Shock, fury, fear, something else he couldn't name. What are you doing here, she said. Not a question, an accusation. Julian got out of the car on legs that felt like they might give out. His tuxedo felt ridiculous in the afternoon sunlight. Sloane was wearing scrubs, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup, looking exactly like she had 3 years ago except for the hardness around her eyes. You sent me a photo, he said. His voice came out rough. Of our children. So I came. You're supposed to be getting married in. She checked her watch. About 90 minutes. I'm not getting married, Julian said. I'm here. She stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You drove to Portland, in your wedding tuxedo, 2 hours before your ceremony, because I sent you a picture. Yes. She laughed. But it wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and bitter and full of something that might have been pain. You're unbelievable. You know that? 3 years. 3 years I raised them alone, worked night shifts and day shifts and every shift in between to keep a roof over their heads. And you show up now, because I sent you a photo, because you finally decided they might be worth your time. That's not fair, Julian said. Fair? She took a step toward him and he saw the fury in her eyes. You want to talk about fair? You told me family was an inconvenience. You said I was obsessed with a fantasy. And then you went out and built an empire on the ashes of our marriage while I was throwing up every morning and trying to figure out how to afford diapers. Don't talk to me about fair. I didn't know, he said desperately. If I'd known you were pregnant, everything would have been different. Would it? She crossed her arms. Because from where I'm standing, you're about to have a baby with someone else, someone you picked after me, someone who gets the version of you that can afford a family. Her words hit like physical blows. Sloane, please. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. I know that. But I'm here now. And I'm asking for a chance to meet them, to be part of their lives. She studied him for a long moment. Behind her, the duplex door opened and an older woman peered out. Everything okay, Sloane? Fine, Mrs. Chen, Sloane called back. Just an unexpected visitor. The woman looked at Julian with suspicion, then disappeared inside. Sloane turned back to him. You can't just walk in there and blow up their world because you're feeling guilty. They don't know you. They don't know you exist. What am I supposed to tell them? That their father finally decided to show up? I don't know, Julian admitted. I don't know what you tell them, I don't know how any of this works, but I drove here instead of going to my wedding because I need to see them. I need to know them. He broke off. I need to not be the man who abandoned his children. You already are that man, Sloane said quietly. You've been that man for 2.5 years. You don't get to absolve yourself by showing up in a tuxedo. I'm not trying to absolve myself, Julian said. I'm trying to do the right thing. 3 years too late. She was right. Of course she was right. But he was here anyway, standing in front of her, every carefully constructed wall he'd built crumbling to dust. Please, he said. I'm begging you. Let me meet them. Just once. And if you never want to see me again after that, I'll respect it. I'll set up a trust fund. Make sure they have everything they need. But please don't make me leave without seeing their faces. Sloane's expression flickered. For just a second, the hardness cracked and he saw the woman he'd married. The woman who'd believed in him when no one else did. The woman he'd destroyed. They're napping, she said finally. They'll be up in about 20 minutes. You can wait on the porch. But Julian, if you upset them, if you make this harder for them in any way, I will end you. Do you understand me? I understand. She nodded and went inside, leaving him standing in the yard. 20 minutes felt like 20 years. Julian sat on the porch steps, his hands shaking, his heart racing so fast he thought he might pass out. His phone was still off. He could only imagine the chaos back in Seattle. Vivian standing at the altar, waiting. His mother's face when she realized he wasn't coming. Marcus trying to explain to 200 guests that the groom had vanished. The business implications. The social implications. The fact that he just torched every relationship and every plan he had. And he didn't care. He didn't care about any of it. Because inside this building, his children were waking up from a nap. The door opened. Sloane stood there, her expression unreadable. They're up, she said. Are you sure you want to do this? More sure than I've been about anything in 3 years. She stepped aside. He walked into a small living room that was nothing like his penthouse. The furniture was second-hand but clean. Toys were scattered across the floor. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator, and sitting on a worn couch, looking at him with identical curious expressions, were 2 toddlers. The air left his lungs. They were real. Impossibly, devastatingly real. The boy had Julian's dark hair and his serious eyebrows. The girl had Sloane's smile and the same stubborn tilt to her chin. But they both had his gray eyes, eyes that were studying him with the frank assessment only children could manage. Declan? Iris, Sloane said, her voice carefully neutral. This is Julian. She hesitated. He's someone Mommy used to know. Are you Mommy's friend? The girl asked. Iris. Her voice was high and clear and perfect. I hope so, Julian said. His voice cracked. Can you play trucks? The boy asked. Declan. Holding a red fire engine. I don't know, Julian admitted. I've never tried, but I'd like to learn. Declan considered this, then held out the truck. You can have the fire truck. I'll be the ambulance. And just like that, Julian found himself sitting on the floor of his ex-wife's living room, in a Tom Ford tuxedo, playing trucks with a 2.5-year-old boy who had his eyes and none of his mistakes. Iris climbed down from the couch and brought him a stuffed elephant. This is Peanut, she announced. She's very important. She looks important, Julian said seriously. Iris nodded, satisfied, and settled herself next to him. Close enough to touch, but not touching. Just existing in his space like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sloane watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Julian played with his children for 20 minutes that felt like both seconds and eternity. Declan showed him every truck in his collection and explained in detail which ones were the fastest. Iris told him a long, complicated story about Peanut's adventures that involved a castle and a dragon and a trip to the grocery store, and Julian felt something in his chest crack open. Something he'd kept locked away for 3 years because it hurt too much to feel. This was what he'd lost. This. Not the abstract concept of children or family, but this specific boy with his serious explanations. This specific girl with her wild imagination. These specific people who were half him and half Sloane and entirely their own. Eventually, Iris yawned and climbed into Sloane's lap. "I'm hungry," she announced. "Me too," Declan agreed. Sloane looked at Julian. "I need to make them dinner. You should probably go." Julian stood, brushing off his tuxedo pants. "Can I?" He hesitated. "Can I come back?" Sloane's expression was guarded. "I don't know, Julian. This isn't simple. You have a whole life in Seattle, a fiancé, a baby on the way. I need to think about what's best for them, not what makes you feel less guilty." "I know," he said. "But Sloane, they're my children too. And I know I don't deserve anything from you. I know I gave up that right. But please don't shut me out now that I know they exist." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'll think about it. That's all I can promise right now." He wanted to argue, wanted to demand, wanted to explain that every second away from them now felt like dying. But he'd forfeited the right to demand anything. "Okay," he said. "Thank you for letting me meet them." As he walked to the door, Iris called out, "Julian?" He turned. "Are you coming back?" "I hope so," he said honestly. "If your mom says it's okay." "Okay," she said simply, and went back to playing with Peanut. Julian drove back to Seattle in a daze. He turned on his phone halfway there and it immediately exploded with notifications. 47 missed calls, 63 texts, 5 voicemails. He ignored all of them except one text from Marcus. "Vivian's at your place. She's furious. I told her you had an emergency, but dude, you need to fix this. Now." Julian pulled over at a rest stop and finally listened to the voicemails. His mother, crying. Marcus, angry. Patricia, his lawyer, sounding concerned. And Vivian. 3 messages from Vivian. The first was confused. "Julian, where are you? Everyone's here. Are you okay?" The second was angry. "You left me at the altar, in front of everyone I know. You humiliated me. Call me back right now." The third was cold. "I know where you went. I hired someone to follow you after you started acting strange. I know about the ex-wife and the children, and I know what you did today. We need to talk. Tonight." Julian closed his eyes. Of course she'd hired someone. He'd probably have done the same thing in her position. He drove the rest of the way on autopilot, his mind still in that small living room, still seeing his children's faces, still feeling Declan's small hand putting a truck in his. It was dark when he got back to Seattle. He parked in the garage and took the elevator up to the penthouse, feeling like a man walking to his execution. Vivian was waiting in the living room, still in her wedding dress. It was beautiful, lace and silk, and probably cost more than Sloane's rent for 6 months. She looked like a magazine cover. And her eyes were ice. "So," she said, "you drove to Portland to see your secret children with your secret ex-wife." "I'm sorry," Julian said. It's the only thing he could think to say. "You're sorry," she repeated. "You left me at the altar, made me look like a fool in front of everyone who matters. And you're sorry." "Vivian, I didn't know about them until 3 days ago. I found out the same night you told me about the pregnancy. I've been trying to process it. So you decided to process it by abandoning our wedding." She stood, and he saw tears on her face. "Do you have any idea what today was like for me? Standing there in front of everyone, waiting, and you just never came. Your mother cried. My father threatened to sue you. And I had to smile and pretend it was fine. Pretend I wasn't dying inside. I never meant to hurt you," Julian said, "but I had to see them. I had to know they were real." "And what about our baby?" she demanded. "What about the child I'm carrying? Do we just not matter?" He looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw the tears, the anger, the hurt, and underneath it, something else. Something that looked like fear. "When did you know?" he asked quietly. "Know what?" "That the baby isn't mine." Her face went white, then red. You can't just accuse me, Julian. The doctors told me I'm essentially sterile. The chances of me fathering 1 child naturally are astronomical. 2 is impossible. So either I'm the luckiest man alive or you're lying. Which is it?" Vivian sat down hard, her hands shaking. "How did you, Marcus?" Julian said. "I had him run some numbers. The timeline didn't add up. You said you were on birth control when we met. Said the pregnancy was a surprise. But you pushed to move in together after only 2 months. Pushed to combine finances. Pushed for me to sign a lease on this place with both our names. You were setting up a safety net. For when I found out." Her silence was answer enough. "Who's the father?" She looked away. "Does it matter?" "Yes," he said. "It matters. Richard," she whispered. "The venture capitalist. Your competitor." Julian laughed. It came out harsh. "You're pregnant with Richard Chen's baby and you were going to let me think it was mine. Let me raise it. Support it. All while you what? Maintained your lifestyle? Your social position?" "I love you," she said desperately. "I do, Julian. Richard was a mistake. One night, I panicked when I found out. And then you were so successful and kind and I thought maybe we could make it work. Maybe you'd never have to know. But you were never going to tell me the truth," Julian said. "Even after I stood at that altar today, you were going to let me believe the baby was mine." "I didn't know what else to do," she said, tears streaming down her face. "My father would disown me if he knew. Richard's married. I had no one else. And you're so good, Julian. So stable. I thought maybe." She broke off. "Maybe you'd love the baby anyway." Julian felt a strange calm settle over him. For 3 years, he'd been building a life on lies. His own lies mostly. Lies about being overslown. Lies about not caring about children. Lies about success being enough. And now here was Vivian building her own lies on top of his. And it was all collapsing. "I want you out of the penthouse by tomorrow," he said. "What?" "Pack your things. Take whatever you want. I'll have Patricia draw up papers releasing you from the lease. You can keep the ring. Sell it if you need to. But I want you gone." "You can't just throw me out," Vivian said. "I'm pregnant." "With someone else's child," Julian said. "I'm sorry you're in this position. I'm sorry Richard's married. I'm sorry your father's an asshole. But I can't fix your life for you. Not anymore." "What am I supposed to do?" she asked. "Tell Richard the truth. Tell your father the truth. Or don't. But that's your decision, not mine. I'm done being responsible for other people's lies." He walked to the bedroom and started packing a bag. Vivian followed, still crying. "Julian, please. We can work this out. Talk about it. We don't have to." "No," he said, shoving clothes into a suitcase. "We don't. Because I don't love you, Vivian. I like you. I respect you, or I did. But I don't love you the way you deserve to be loved. The way I love Sloan. And you don't love me either. You love what I represent." "I love you," she insisted. "Then you'll let me go," he said. He finished packing and walked out of the penthouse, leaving her standing in the bedroom, still in her wedding dress, crying. He checked into a hotel downtown, lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. His phone rang. "Marcus. Dude, what the hell happened? You vanished. Vivian's a wreck. Everyone's talking." "Marcus," Julian said, "I need your help." "With what?" "I need to move to Portland." Silence. Then, "Are you insane?" "The IPO is in 2 weeks. The board will flip." "I don't care," Julian said. "I have children, Marcus, real children, and I've already missed 2.5 years. I can't miss any more. So either you run the company without me, or we postpone the IPO. Your choice. You're serious. Completely serious." More silence. Then Marcus laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. "You know this is going to cost you millions, right? Maybe the whole company." "I know. And you're still doing it." "I am." "Okay then," Marcus said. "I guess I'll tell the board. Good luck, man. You're going to need it." Julian hung up and immediately called Patricia. "I need you to do 3 things," he said when she answered. "First, draft a settlement with Vivian. Generous but clear. She gets out of the penthouse, I cover 6 months' rent somewhere else, and we're done. Second, set up a trust fund for my children, Declan and Iris Bennett. Everything I have goes to them if anything happens to me. Third, find me a place to rent in Portland. Something near Sloane's address. Something with space for kids. Patricia was quiet for a beat. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. You know you're probably going to lose the IPO. Maybe. But I'm not losing my children. All right, she said. I'll have papers for you by Monday. Thank you. Julian, she said before he could hang up. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing, even if it's financial suicide. He smiled for the first time in days. Thanks, Patricia. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Declan's serious face, Iris's smile, the way they'd existed so completely in his presence, like he belonged there. He wanted to call Sloane, wanted to tell her everything, that he'd ended things with Vivian, that he was moving to Portland, that he was choosing them. But it was late, and he'd made enough impulsive choices for one day. So instead, he pulled up the photo she'd sent, his children, his family, and he made a promise. He was going to be the father they deserved, even if it took the rest of his life to earn that right. The next morning, Julian drove back to Portland. He'd texted Sloane at 7 a.m. I need to talk to you. Can I come by? Her response came an hour later. Kids are at daycare until 4. Come at 10. He showed up at 9:55, 2 coffees in hand, and knocked on her door. She answered in jeans and a sweater, her hair down, looking guarded. You brought coffee, she said. I remember how you take it, he replied. Cream and sugar. She took the cup, a slight softening around her eyes. Come in. The living room looked different without the children. Quieter. Emptier. He sat on the same couch where Declan had been yesterday. Sloane sat across from him in an armchair, creating distance. So, she said, how was your wedding? I didn't get married, Julian said. I ended the engagement. Sloane's eyebrows shot up. Because of the kids? Partly, he said. But also because the baby isn't mine. She was quiet, absorbing that. I'm sorry. Are you? She considered. Then, yeah, I think I am. Even after everything, I don't like seeing you hurt. That's more than I deserve, Julian said. He set down his coffee. Sloane, I need to tell you some things. And I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that? She nodded slowly. I was an idiot, he started. 3 years ago, I was drowning and I didn't know how to ask for help. The business was failing. We were broke. And when we got that diagnosis, I panicked. I couldn't see a way forward that didn't involve losing everything we'd built. He took a breath. But that's not an excuse. I chose wrong. I chose success over you, money over family, my pride over our marriage, and I've regretted it every single day since. When you left, I tried to find you. I hired investigators, called everyone we knew, but you'd disappeared. And eventually I told myself it was for the best, that we wanted different things, that some marriages just fail. He met her eyes, but I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped wondering where you were, if you were happy, if you ever thought about me. And then I built this whole life, this successful life, and it was empty. Every single piece of it was empty, because none of it mattered without you. Sloane's expression was unreadable. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Julian said. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm just telling you that I was wrong. About everything. And now that I know about Declan and Iris, I can't go back to Seattle and pretend. I can't keep building a life that doesn't include them. So I'm moving here. To Portland. I'm setting up a trust fund for them. I'm going to be present. Available. Whatever they need. Whatever you need. He leaned forward. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I burned that bridge. But I'm asking for a chance to be their father. To show up. To be the man I should have been 3 years ago. Sloane was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. Do you know what it was like? Finding out I was pregnant after everything? After the doctor said it was impossible? After you'd made it clear you didn't want it? I was terrified, Julian. Alone. Broke. And I considered not keeping them. She wiped her eyes. But I couldn't. They were the miracle we'd been told we'd never have. And they were mine. So I worked 3 jobs while I was pregnant. Saved every penny. Had them in a hospital where I worked so I could get the staff discount. Brought them home to a studio apartment and figured it out. His throat burned. Sloan. I was so angry at you, she continued. So hurt. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to suffer the way I was suffering. I wanted you to miss out on them as punishment. And for 2.5 years, I told myself I was justified. That you deserved it. She looked at him directly. But then they started asking about their dad. And I realized I wasn't punishing you. I was punishing them. Taking away their right to know their father because I was angry. So I sent you that message. And that photo. Because they deserve more than my anger. I'm sorry, Julian said. I'm so sorry. For all of it. I know, she said. And that's why I'm going to let you be part of their lives. But Julian, you don't get to just walk in and be dad. You have to earn that. You have to show up consistently. You have to put them first. Can you do that? Yes, he said without hesitation. I'll do whatever it takes. Okay, she said. Then we'll figure it out. Together. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sloan said, You really ended things with your fiancé? I did. And the business? I'm handing control to my partner. Moving here full-time. She studied him. That's a lot to give up. It's not giving up, Julian said. It's choosing right for once. The corner of her mouth twitched. Might be the first smart thing you've said in 3 years. To start. Over the next few weeks, Julian moved to Portland. He found a 2-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from Sloan's duplex. Set up an office. Started doing video calls with Marcus about the business. And most importantly, he started building a relationship with his children. It was slow at first. Awkward. Declan and Iris didn't understand who he was or why he was suddenly around. But Sloan helped. She explained in simple terms that Julian was their dad, that he loved them, that he wanted to be part of their lives. And gradually, tentatively, his children let him in. He learned that Declan loved trucks, but was terrified of loud noises. That Iris could negotiate anything but fell apart if Peanut the elephant wasn't within reach. That they both loved pancakes and hated broccoli, and had Sloan's stubborn streak. He learned how to change diapers and give baths and read the same book 17 times without losing patience. He learned that being a parent wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up, every day, even when you were tired, even when it was hard. And slowly, something shifted. Declan started calling him Daddy. Iris started asking when he was coming over. They started to exist in his presence, not as curious strangers, but as his children. One evening, 2 months after he'd moved to Portland, Julian was helping Sloan make dinner while the kids played in the living room. You're getting better at this, Sloan said, watching him chop vegetables. The cooking or the parenting? Both. He smiled. I had a good teacher. She bumped his shoulder with hers. A small gesture, but it felt like forgiveness. Julian, she said after a moment, I need to tell you something. His heart jumped. Okay. I'm not saying this to mess with your head, she said. And I'm not saying it means anything has to change. But I need you to know. She took a breath. I never stopped loving you. Even when I hated you. Even when I was so angry I couldn't see straight. There was always this part of me that remembered who you were before everything fell apart. And watching you with them these last 2 months, seeing you show up every single day, she trailed off. It's made me remember why I married you in the first place. Julian set down the knife, his hands shaking. Sloan, I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I just needed you to know that it's not just about the kids, that maybe someday, if you prove you're really in this for the long haul, maybe we could. She stopped. I never stopped loving you either, Julian said. Every relationship I've had since you was just me trying to find you again. And I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I have to earn back your trust. But Sloan, if you're saying there's a possibility, any possibility at all, Then I'll wait as long as it takes. She looked at him for a long moment, then kissed him. It was soft, tentative, nothing like the passionate kisses of their marriage, but it felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, she said, "Don't screw this up, Archer." "I won't," he promised. "Daddy," Iris called from the living room. "Declan hit me." Julian sighed. "And that's my cue." Sloane laughed. "Welcome to parenting." He walked into the living room, refereed the dispute, and got both kids to apologize. And as he sat on the floor playing trucks with Declan, while Iris braided his hair, with Sloane humming in the kitchen and the smell of dinner cooking and his family all around him, Julian thought about the man he'd been 3 years ago. That man who'd thought success meant money, who'd thought family was a burden, who'd driven away from the fertility clinic and straight into his biggest mistake. He wished he could go back and tell that man the truth, that the miracle wasn't building a fortune. It was these two small people who called him Daddy, this woman who'd given him a second chance, this messy, imperfect, beautiful life. 6 months later, Julian stood in the backyard of the small house he'd bought, big enough for all of them, and watched Sloane walk toward him. She wore a simple white dress, no veil, no train, just her, smiling like she had on their first wedding day, when they'd been broke and young and certain they could survive anything. This time they weren't in a courthouse. They were surrounded by people who mattered. Mrs. Chen from the duplex, nurses from Sloane's hospital, Marcus, who'd flown in from Seattle, Patricia, who'd helped negotiate the custody agreement that had eventually become unnecessary, and standing next to Julian, serving as best man and flower girl, Declan in a tiny suit and Iris in a purple dress she'd insisted on choosing herself. "Mommy looks pretty," Iris whispered loudly. "She does," Julian agreed. When Sloane reached him, he took her hands. "Ready to try this again?" she asked. "With you?" "Always." The ceremony was short. They'd written their own vows this time. Sloane went first. "Julian, 3 years ago, you broke my heart, and I thought that was the end of our story. But what I've learned is that sometimes the end is just the middle in disguise. You came back, you showed up, you chose us. And that's the only thing that matters. I promise to love you, to trust you, to build a life with you that's bigger than both of us." Julian's turn. His voice cracked. "Sloane, I spent years chasing success because I thought that's what would make me happy. And then I found out I already had everything I needed. You, Declan, Iris, this family. I promise to never take that for granted again. I promise to show up every single day. I promise to choose right." The officiant smiled. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you again, husband and wife." When Julian kissed Sloane, Declan said loudly, "You kissing." Iris giggled, and everyone laughed. The reception was casual. Backyard barbecue, children running everywhere. The kind of celebration that was more about people than presentation. At one point, Marcus pulled Julian aside. "You know the IPO fell through, right?" "I know," Julian said. "And you're okay with that?" "I have everything I need," Julian said, watching Sloane spin Iris in a circle while Declan chased bubbles. Marcus shook his head. "A year ago, you would have burned the world down to make that deal happen." "Yeah," Julian said. "But a year ago, I didn't know what actually mattered. That night, after the guests left and the kids were asleep upstairs in their new rooms, Julian and Sloane sat on the back porch, her head on his shoulder. "You know what I was thinking?" she said. "What?" "That day, 3 years ago, when you drove away from the clinic. If I'd known then that we'd end up here, maybe it wouldn't have hurt so much." Julian kissed her forehead. "I'm glad we got a second chance." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear over Portland, both of them finally home. Upstairs, Declan stirred in his sleep, dreaming of fire trucks. Iris hugged Peanut closer, and the family that shouldn't have been possible slept under one roof, proof that sometimes miracles do happen, just not on the timeline anyone expects. What did you think of Julian and Sloane's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to follow all our stories. And check out more emotional stories right here on the final screen.